Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to present the first virtual talk about NFTs from New Collectors. Before we start, I want to mention that this talk is being recorded and will be posted to the New Collectors YouTube channel for future viewing. So these are the people participating in today's talk. My name is Sabila Mayorelli, and I'm the founder of New Collectors. David Hernandez is a community organizer and photographer who has already been working with creatives to learn more about the process of creating NFT projects. Danielle Briggs is a designer and animator who has experience creating and exhibiting her NFTs. And Henry Harbo is a consultant for tech companies and DAOs. So David and I will be presenting the slides today, and then Danielle and Henry will join us for the Q&A. You can ask your questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end of the talk. So just a brief intro into New Collectors. New Collectors is an art gallery in the Lower East Side. It was founded in November of 2020 as an online art gallery focused on creating content for people to get more engaged in the art market. In July of 2021, it opened as a physical gallery with monthly exhibitions featuring work by emerging artists. Now in 2022, the gallery is hosting talks and workshops about NFTs to give our audience the tools to embrace Web3. So congratulations, you're participating in the first talk, the first part of this series. So how is New Collectors embracing Web3? New Collectors aims to onboard art lovers, creatives, and collectors to the emerging world of Web3. We are redefining gallery spaces and the way art will be consumed, shared, and collected, making the NFT space more diverse and inclusive. So we will be doing this by hosting online and in-person talks and panels like this one. We will be hosting group and one-on-one workshops to onboard creatives and collectors. We will be minting physical work purchased through the gallery. We will cover what minting is in a minute. And we will be exhibiting work in virtual spaces, offering a different viewing experience that can reach a wider audience. So in order to understand the basics, we need to cover some terminology. We could go more in depth into each of these points, but our goal for today is to just introduce you all to the world of Web3. We hope that at the end of this talk, you will be able to continue doing your own research and going down your own rabbit holes, because there are many. So before jumping into Web3, we need to understand what Web 1 and Web 2 are. So Web 1 was open source, meaning anyone could build a website and publish content. Very few people had the skills to do that. For the majority of people, the web was read only. So you could read other people's content, but only people who really knew how to code could upload that content. And user-to-user interaction was also very limited. Web 2 is what we understand the web to be today. Around 2004, platforms such as YouTube and Twitter and Google changed everything. Anyone can create accounts and publish content online, but that content is stored on a private server and is owned by the tech company. You don't own the content you publish, and it can't be transferred from one server to another. So for example, a post on Instagram cannot be then transferred to LinkedIn because they operate on different private servers that don't communicate with each other. So Web3. Web3 was popularized in 2019, even though Bitcoin has been around since around 2008. So Web3 is the next iteration of the internet where decentralization is preferential to the big tech companies associated with Web 2. Users can create content on decentralized platforms, own their content, and move their content from one platform to another. One of the best ways to understand this is to look at in-game NFTs. So for when you buy an in-game NFT, such as an outfit for a game character, you can use that outfit for your character in multiple games, even if the games are not owned by the same company. So it's a piece of content you own, and you can interact with that content on different platforms. In Web3, your wallet replaces your username and password that you would generally enter to access your account. With a simple Chrome browser extension, you can connect your wallet to Web3 platforms to access your account information. And then Web3 is also the umbrella term to refer to the products, communities, and culture created out of blockchain-based technology. So blockchains are the foundational technology behind all crypto. It's a digital, publicly viewable ledger storing accounts, balances, and transactions. It's also immutable, which means it is safer and more secure. And each cryptocurrency operates on a different blockchain. So in this screenshot, you can see when it was taken, you could see the last, transactions that had gone up, been added to the blockchain. So it's very transparent, and you'll see more screenshots like this later. So this is just an example of what a transaction on the blockchain would look like. So if A wants to send money, or if A wants to send 0.5 Ethereum to B, A proposes a new transaction to move 0.5 Ethereum to B's account. This proposal is then broadcast to the entire Ethereum network. Multiple parties have to check that A has 0.5 ETH before approving the transaction. And then once approved, the blockchain is updated, and the transaction is now final and viewable to all. So NFT, you probably have all heard this word, this NFT, and maybe some of you know it stands for non-fungible token. So NFTs are a unique and non-interchangeable unit of data stored on a blockchain. NFTs are generally stored on the Ethereum blockchain, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. They're used to create digital scarcity, which is a way for creators to design limits to how their digital creations are replicated. And it also allows them to monetize their digital assets. Examples of NFTs include, but are not limited to, digital artwork, music, fashion, domain names, icons, a certificate, an in-game item, which I spoke about earlier, and a ticket that gives you access to an event. So there's a lot of possibility with NFTs. There are a lot of things that you can do with this technology, and it's not limited to just digital art. And so this is an example of an NFT on OpenSea, and OpenSea is the most popular NFT platform. So this NFT has an ID, it's the token ID. And here we can see a lot of information about this digital asset, including all of the transactions, which are on the right. So who transferred it, who is the current owner, how much it was transferred for. All of that information is transparent, and you can look it up on Etherscan if you're looking for something on the Ethereum blockchain. David, I think you're muted.
Yep. Perfect, sorry. Hey everybody, David Hernandez again. I'm gonna kind of jump in here and help out with some of the terminology, some community facts, and then also some things to consider, but I'm gonna jump in with minting. So minting is, in its general term, it's the process of essentially publishing the digital asset onto the blockchain. And so whether it be creating your own digital asset or buying a digital asset from a different company or project, that actual transaction of bringing that asset to your wallet is essentially that minting. Normally, minting requires a fee. There are times it doesn't require a fee, but generally speaking, when we're talking Ethereum, there are fees included with minting. And for the most part, kind of like what we're describing with, the Web 1 of internet, where it was all read only, and a lot of people didn't have that ability to actually create content. Web 3 has given it back to people like us that allows and their platforms like OpenSea that allow streamlined minting. And so we'll get into that a little bit later, but next slide. So the next thing I want to jump into is gas, which is essentially a transaction fee for operating on the Ethereum blockchain. Similar to when you go to the grocery store and you spend $100, a fraction of that $100 actually gets kicked back to banks for a processing fee. You want to kind of think of gas as similar to that processing fee for the transaction, but it's not a static number. It actually is completely contingent on how many people are using the blockchain at that specific time, and how many other people are essentially vying for that transaction to be added to the blockchain. So sometimes a transaction that normally costs or could cost $10, if you try that same transaction in about an hour, it could cost less, or it could cost exponentially more. Next slide. The next word I want to jump into, or next term, would be wallet, and kind of described a little bit before. A wallet is essentially your personal place to store and access your own digital assets and interact with the blockchain. So instead of having a Google account or a Facebook account store all of your information, you actually are able to use these decentralized wallets to store not only your information, but currency and other digital assets like NFTs. We can definitely get into a bunch of different wallet companies and digital applications, but that's definitely for something for our level 2 of the rabbit hole for sure. So next slide. The next word I want to jump into, or term I want to jump into, is smart contracts. And smart contracts are essentially the programmable code that gives the rules for the digital asset. So whether it be royalties, ownership, or whatever, I don't want to really give a ceiling to the different possibilities for smart contracts because they're endless, but traditionally we see them attached to NFTs when it comes to royalties, when it comes to ownership, when it comes to copyright, and a few different tangible assets like that. But for the most part, the smart contracts are just the rules. And as you consider on the creator side, your projects that you're looking to put out, the ownership and the actual rules of that ownership are things that in Web3 you get to craft, and that's through smart contracts. Next slide. So now that we're kind of through the beginning terminology, just wanted to speak about community and where you can actually see where the world of Web3 and NFTs live. It's a digital space, so you can't, a lot of the time, you can't come to web forums like this or in real life places. So kind of just understanding where that community lives is huge. So we're going to jump into that now. The main place that the Web3 community lives, or the metaverse community lives, ironically, is not on Meta or Instagram, or formerly known as Facebook. It's actually on Twitter, Discord, and Telegram, which are 3 platforms that have essentially become hubs for this Web3 community. Twitter is if you do not have a Twitter, Discord, or Telegram, I highly recommend you guys, one, make an account and kind of just get in the mix of these communities, and we can point you in the right way. But these are definitely spaces that are just been homes for this kind of innovation. And so in the center here is a screenshot of the New Collectors Discord, which is similar to like a club page. It has it's a forum for information, all specified to that specific club, and in this case, New Collectors. And then on the far right, you'll see a screenshot of the New Collectors Twitter, which is also a nice hub for all things New Collectors and information just on the NFT space. Next slide. So here we're just going to get into some slang or some things that you kind of see interacting with the Web3 community online. And I'll just jump into a few of our favorites. We could easily have tripled this list, but we just kind of wanted to give you all a streamlined idea of just some of the things you'll see encountering Web3 people online. So one of my favorite words or terms you can see say in the Web3 space is WAGMI, or W-A-G-M-I, and it stands for "We're all gonna make it." And it's one of those endearing terms in the space that really just kind of speaks to the ethos that the space is for creators, it's for everybody, and there's space and enough money and time and just energy to go around for everyone. So this idea, instead of in traditional art senses where one artist's success means the other artist's failure, this is actually understanding that rising tide rises all boats, and the better the community is doing, the better the individual artist will do as well. And to get into the next word, just to kind of get into another one of my favorites too, just alpha. It's kind of like what we're doing here. Alpha is just information and intel. Just understanding and finding appropriate alpha in this space is super huge. And we could definitely give a Google to all these different words, but understanding and seeing these is huge just for interacting with the community. So next slide. So now we're just going to jump into some NFT platforms that are widely used. We're kind of keeping it focused to the Ethereum blockchain here. There are other cryptocurrencies, and you probably have heard of Bitcoin and a bunch of different things. But to keep this focused for this presentation, we're really sticking to Ethereum, which is the essential blue chip cryptocurrency for the NFT marketplaces. And so OpenSea is without a doubt the formidable number one. In the last 12 days of 2022, they've transacted about $2.5 billion in NFT sales. So there's a huge active market there on OpenSea. Foundation and Super Rare are platforms that are a little bit more curated in their marketplace. Creators actually need to be invited by other creators, as well as the fact that they do like Dutch auctions and different auction styles that really incentivize like high quality and I guess like fine art in the NFT space. So next slide. Here we're going to go into just the different types of Web3 art there are available, and there are definitely more than 6 different buckets, but this is just to kind of give you all an idea of the different types of art that's available. Generative art is something that I've seen really explode on the Web3 space. Websites like artblocks.io have really given space to these algorithmic artists to create programmable art that just makes really beautiful creations. PFP projects stands for profile picture projects that in this world of digital flexing and digital establishing your identity, these profile pictures actually help establish or let people know what communities you're part of, what things you're interested in, and it's just a really quick to streamline way to show your personality. That's actually a crypto mori that I own and a profile picture I use sometimes. The NFT photography is just a huge world in the NFT space. I honestly think in 2021 had it extremely neglected, but I've already seen in the last 12 days of 2022 that NFT photographers are really getting a stride in a space. They were recently added as a category on OpenSea, and it's just something that's really taking shape. This specific photography photo is called Old Money, and it's actually by one of our new collector, I guess, family members, Emily. She might be on the chat, so if she is, definitely check out her work. World building is exactly what it sounds like. It's essentially virtual architects creating worlds and galleries and just amazing spaces to interact with virtually. That is, you're looking at Mars Home by Krista Kim. NFT fashion, like Sybil was mentioning, just whether it be inside clothing, inside games as clothing, wearables, or actually augmented reality, like NFTs that are actually superimposed on real life. There are many different ways where NFT fashion is really pushing what might not have traditionally been considered a wearable for humans, but in the metaverse it is. And then NFT music, just like photography and all these different art veins, is just another art that relies heavily on creative input, but also in traditional senses don't really get their royalties or the work or money that time is due. And so NFT music is a space that is blowing up this year and blowing up last year with just people who are trying to own their art. Next slide. And so just to kind of jump into some alternatives to Ethereum, I've been mentioning Ethereum, which is once again the currency that a lot of these more blue chip and streamlined NFT projects live on. It's not perfect. There's a lot of negatives to Ethereum. And so there have been competitors to kind of challenge the platform that it's created. So you might have seen Tezos or Cardano, Polygon. These all have their own essentially like selling point as a competitor to Ethereum, whether it be lower transaction fees, more sustainability focused, or interoperability in between blockchains, kind of like Sybil was mentioning earlier, to kind of take that asset and allow it to be used in many different places. Next slide. So now we're kind of coming to the tail end here and just wanted to just bring up some things to consider as you embark in your Web3 journey. So ownership versus consumption. This is something that's brought up a lot in the NFT movement. With the, you can kind of see in the picture here on the right with this whole idea of, save and click lets you essentially own the image. And I feel like coming out of the Web2 space, when we see photos on Instagram or Google Images, there really isn't a monetary value we attach to these works. But now in the Web3 space, where these JPEGs actually have not only a monetary value, but an ownership, and there's a way to actually verify it. Simply saving and clicking and saving doesn't actually give you the copyrights, doesn't give you the ownership or access to the community or ownership. Just like on the picture on the left here, going to a museum and taking a picture of the Starry Night or another famous work doesn't give you ownership of that image. Or similar to downloading a music video doesn't give you ownership to the streaming rights and revenue that comes off of the advertisements. So actually owning the asset in the space is really, really huge compared to people just seeing your digital asset, which it will be available for people to see. Next slide. And so the I think Sibylla is going to jump in on this one.
Yeah. So I think that the conversation of value is very similar to the traditional art world. And so I'm going to try to make some analogies to how we normally think about value and art. So we understand the value of buying a unique painting. If we were to ask an artist to copy that painting, it might look the same or look similar, but its value would be diminished. So we understand that this copy is illegitimate, it's not the original, and therefore does not have the same value. Digital art is a bit different because it's data. So you literally right click and save an image, you're making an identical copy. So why is the identical copy of an image less valuable? So NFTs provide a technology, it's the blockchain technology that enables us to track the history of a given digital asset, who created it and who owns it. That's what we're seeing on the right on the slide. So this is very similar to how we prove the legitimacy of physical art with a certificate of authenticity, which you can see an example on the left. Before NFTs, you could not create scarcity of a digital asset, and digital artists have struggled to monetize their work and prove originality. But now with blockchains, they're able to do both. Since we have not been able to assign value to digital art in the past, it is difficult for some people to understand why we value it now. But comparing NFTs to the value of originality and scarcity in the traditional art world can help us. So, for example, a lot of times the value in an artwork is how we feel when we look at it. Very similar to how I would recommend we start looking at NFTs. So if you like the way an NFT looks and you can afford it, you may want to buy it regardless of whether or not it will go up in price.
All right. I'm going to thank you for that, Sibylla. I'm going to jump back in just to kind of touch on royalties. This is something that I deal a lot with creators and artists who are interested in the NFT space, specifically off of this word alone. Especially with artists who have their own creative lane and are not looking for new ways to monetize, but more so just been hearing this. Royalties are something that, kind of kicking it back to smart contracts, that you're able to assign to the assets you mint onto the blockchain. And this is just here a quick snapshot of what using a platform like OpenSea, it would look like as a creator to sell an NFT for essentially 1 Ethereum and then watch it get resold for 6 Ethereum, and just seeing how those fees are essentially being kicked back to the creator, but they're also, depending on the platform you use, are also being taken there. And I was actually recently put on to the fact that there are also platforms that, as a collector, also pay back royalties if it exchanges hands beyond a few times beyond you. So there's even places where the creator is always being taken care of, but even in places where the collector, for owning such a a valuable NFT, could see dividends down the line for exchanging it. So next slide. And just to touch on copyright too, which is another huge talking point with a lot of the creators I help on board. People want to know like what happens to the photos they sell, what happens to the music they sell, and things like that. And essentially, it comes down to the smart contracts that are being deployed when you mint. And traditionally, the platform standards like OpenSea don't give away copyright. Unless a project actually decides to go into the smart contracts and give away copyright with each minted NFT. Traditionally, most blockchains, most platforms don't do that. So luckily, you don't get your copyright. If someone gets your NFT, they can't just print your photo out or print your image out and mass produce it and sell it just because they bought the NFT. It's more the digital ownership of the asset, not the copyrights, unless you give them away, and all specified in the smart contracts. And the reason I have this gutter pigeon here is this is just another NFT I own where the project actually allows me to use the likeness and market it as much as I like. I have a 3D image of this that I could hypothetically superimpose into cartoon shows. And essentially I can go as crazy as I would like with this NFT just because I have the copyrights. And this is truly, as long as I have this NFT in my wallet, I own and retain copyrights to it. Next slide. And then here, just want to kind of just touch on taxes really quickly. We're talking about fine art, we're talking about collecting, we're talking about displaying. And in the mix of this, art is very much, and historically has been in a mixture of high finance and there's money being exchanged. And so it's not financial advice by any means, but we really advise that you talk to a tax professional who understands crypto tax codes. In the United States, net positive transactions are classified as income. So just keep that in mind. Keep your gas transactions, all the fees you're paying, and just stay hip to all the different ways that the government is eventually going to want to tax this. So if you need any specific direction on that, definitely please contact us. And there are definitely people in our network, but for the most part, just stay on top of your transactions. Next slide. Oh.
So environmental impact. This is a very big topic in NFTs. So blockchain technology does require a lot of energy, but we have to remember that we're at the very early stages of its development. And as the technology becomes more widely used, the innovation to make it better will continue to evolve rapidly. And we're already seeing this happen. So Ethereum is switching from proof of work to proof of stake, which makes it 99.95% more energy efficient. This basically means it needs less computer power to verify the blocks. Some other initiatives working to make blockchains more eco-friendly include Currency Works, which turns solid waste into energy to mine crypto, and Starkware, which reduces 200 to 200,000 times less energy consumption by packing more information into each block on the blockchain. There are also strategies to making it a more sustainable technology. So for example, mining in areas that have excess renewable energy, which can't be stored. It's cheaper to waste that renewable energy than to store it or transport it in some cases. So using the excess energy for crypto mining creates value and incentivizes more renewable infrastructure. Also, another thing is you don't necessarily have to participate yet. It's really great that you're all here and you're learning about this, but if it doesn't feel right to you, then you can either wait for Ethereum to switch to proof of stake, or you can find a blockchain that's already using proof of stake. And yeah, this is just the beginning. And links to sources will be in a resource doc that we will send out in our follow-up email. So we want to introduce the 3 C's to you guys: creating, collecting, and curating. These are the 3 groups that we are trying to help onboard onto this community. So we really want to be a resource and help the Web3 community grow. We will be hosting a series of workshops, and they will be tailored to help these groups better understand the logistics of participating in Web3. So minting basics, how to price your work, finding collectors, setting up your wallet, learning what DAOs are, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. That's a whole other rabbit hole that we didn't even touch on in this presentation. So there's a lot more to learn, and we will cover these in workshops. We wanted to do it in smaller groups. All right. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Henry and Danielle. So if you have more questions, please add them to the chat.
I think we definitely got a lot towards the top. We could probably sort through.
Okay. All right, so Henry, you kind of covered Beth's question. Minting is not just creating, it is also a term for acquiring. Do you want to touch on that?
Oh yeah, so typically minting is a term just to put your artwork, whether it's digital or physical, and transform it and get it onto the blockchain. So there's fees from doing that, I think, as David and Sibylla mentioned. There are still fees to acquire art, which I think was the original question, but it's generally not called minting. The fees that you would pay to acquire art would be kind of a transaction fee that David talked about, which is what we call gas. I think Whitney asked the question around what is a common gas fee for minting work. I don't know, David, you want to talk a bit about what that might be? And I know you've minted some work before.
So there's definitely different platform and different fees. I minted my work on OpenSea, which luckily I minted back in March, where before the innovation of what they would call lazy minting, which we could definitely go into. Essentially, it allows you to mint without having to every transaction being written on the blockchain. Okay, I don't want to confuse anybody. So essentially, in terms of a transaction fee, there really is no way to estimate what a gas fee is. But using OpenSea, I was able to pay one gas fee essentially to then give me a certification to then mint more projects without having to continuously pay gas fees, which very generally and very long-winded is what lazy minting is, which I feel like we could definitely add that in the resource page because that's its own little loophole. But I know Danielle's also released some work as well.
What David mentioned is definitely a solution, but something that works for me, which is just much easier in my opinion, is, and David did show me this website, but and we can share the link to in our resources, but there are a lot of gas trackers where just kind of like auto refresh. And I'm not gonna lie, I have one almost constantly open on my browser. And you just kind of watch that gauge. And then for me, I have certain numbers that when it dips below a certain number, I know that's a price I'm comfortable with paying. So that's when I'll hit go. And then as long as it's above that number, and I think everyone, that's a personal number for you, kind of what you're comfortable paying in gas, right? And it'll show how much, it'll translate it to US dollars if you want, and all that jazz. But I kind of just leave that open. And then it really is, as for me, it really is, it's like the second it drops below like 80, I go and run and make the transaction. And so, yeah, we can share that link as well.
Yeah, and another thing is that I'm pretty sure when Ethereum switches from proof of work to proof of stake, because it's going to require less energy to make that transaction, the fee is also going to be a lot less, correct? So I think that this problem of gas is being talked about and people are trying to find solutions around it.
Yeah, I've definitely overheard, a few solutions being talked about, whether or not those solutions are being executed or what, but it definitely is something that almost everybody in the community is not a fan of per se. At least the volatility in those fees.
Yeah. So Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I see a question I wanted to kind of jump on.
Yeah.
I saw Brandon mentioned, how do you tie a physical object to an NFT? Which I think is a really, really interesting question. As a creator, my first project actually was directly, I'm a film photographer. And so my first project was actually the minted JPEG that of the scan of that film photography. But then I actually was able to give the NFT purchaser the physical film encased in resin. And the way I was able to do that was essentially on a platform like OpenSea or a lot of these other platforms, you can essentially add an option for an unlockable for the person who owns the NFT. And so that is all upheld by the smart contracts and things like that. But I was able to essentially create a form where if you purchase the NFT, you're able to put in your information, and then I'm the one who actually mails you your object. But that was all completely done easily through the OpenSea platform. And I've seen the back end on a few other platforms. It's very similar to attaching that physical to the digital. Yes. Oh, to your question, it would definitely work with a sculpture. I've seen some really cool sculpture artists create, 3D renderings of objects and sell that, or sell the 2D rendering of an object. And then the physical they would get would actually be the sculpture, or be some kind of like tchotchke or trinket or something like that. So literally the possibilities are endless. Amazing question.
There was a question earlier that makes me think of that said, why would I want to mint like a sketch? Like, what's the point kind of, if I could just sell that in a physical space, or why would I digitize this thing? And I think David touched a bit on this, but there's so many unlock potentials from NFTs, right? You can prove that you own, especially if it's digital work, which can be copied a million times. I could copy and use an NFT digital PFP project as my screensaver maybe, but I don't own that, right? No one can, if someone checks who owns that piece of work, it's not me. So if the creator of that work wants to give everyone who owns her artworks, access to a special dinner, right, in New York, maybe around New Year's, I can't go to that dinner, right? Only the person who actually bought that piece can do that. And that's just one example of all these kind of creative ways to make artwork more community-based, more engaged. And there's other things as well, such as royalties and things that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. So someone is asking, how do you make an NFT popular, or what makes it popular? And then if I create an NFT, I get royalties for each sale. Yes, if you create a one of one, or any sale after the first sale, you get royalties as the artist. Different platforms have different percentages. So I think OpenSea is, I think it's like a sliding scale, like maybe 10 to 15%. It can sometimes be between 10 and 30%, or you could pick 50%. That is what is being programmed into the smart contract. But yeah, you do get royalties for each sale. And then how do you make an NFT popular? So similar to how you would market an exhibition in a physical gallery, it's very similar to how you would market any other product, right? So trying to get that exposure, trying to get people to follow. And I was talking to someone who has an NFT gallery in Denver, and he was saying that they sell the NFTs that are in the show before the show even opens. And that's very similar to what a lot of galleries do, with physical artwork. So trying to find the collectors. And something that's really great about blockchain technology and it being transparent is that you can see what other people are collecting. So you can go see someone's collection, and if you think that, oh, my work, they might like my work based on what they're collecting, you can reach out. And that's a really great way of, I guess, placing your work, finding collectors for your work. And then also it depends on the platform that you're using to upload your NFT. So if you're using OpenSea, OpenSea is the most popular platform. Lots of people are uploading to OpenSea. So your work is probably going to get lost in the mix if you're not marketing it well. But then there are platforms like Foundation, which are a bit more curated maybe. And so if your work is on Foundation, the likelihood of someone seeing it just by browsing is a lot higher. Anything else I'm missing?
No, I think you kind of hit it on your head. It's like courting and finding your community of collectors and people who appreciate what you're creating. Not every art piece needs to, you know, have some crazy in real life utility or metaversal utility. A lot of the time there is art for art's sake in the space, and finding people who appreciate that is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've seen, you know, just kind of similar to what both Sibylla and David mentioned. It kind of does depend on almost where you as an artist, what your niche is and where it falls, right? If your project is centered around, you know, a PFP-based project that is really heavily based in community and utility and some, you know, things like what access that might give you. But then there's artists and animators similar to myself who really is just in this for art's sakes and is into, you know, this new generation and wave of, you know, art and collecting art. And so kind of, you know, having that discussion again with yourself, if you are an artist and how to approach it. And then I do love what Beth Murr said in the chat, because even I myself need help on Twitter, on Discord and Telegram, because that's huge in regards to cultivating your community, finding your community, you know, putting your work out there. And I mean, David's really good. Like it's really about putting yourself out there, like requesting to be a speaker in these Twitter chats, a lot of things that I personally as an artist really struggle with. And so I'm sure other artists can relate to that. So I think it is an interesting part of Web3 and art is the fact that as the artist, you kind of are responsible for being your own salesperson, which I feel like is something a lot of us aren't like comfortable with. So
Yeah.
navigating that together would be awesome.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what we want new collectors to be is, you know, instead of everyone being on their own trying to market their NFT, creating a community where we can share NFTs, share our work with each other and collaborate with each other. So yeah, and there's also in the follow-up email, you'll all be getting a link to our Discord. And today we created a channel where we can, it's like an NFT open call channel. So if you have already minted work or and you want to submit it to be considered for a future show that we might have, please just put your work in there, share it. That's a huge thing, like just getting your work out there and sharing. And it is difficult. But I think that, yeah, once you find your community and you start sharing, I think that the support really just like floods in and people are so supportive in this space. So yeah.
I saw a question. Yeah, I saw a good question. I wanted to mention one answer to, and then I might ask you all to help me with the other part of the question. But Sivan said, if acquiring an NFT generally does not give you copyright, what limitations do you have in terms of displaying a digital asset? For example, you showed us one of the NFTs that you own, David, in a slide. Was that a copy of the asset? I just want to talk a little bit about that kind of conversation, then put it to David for the copyright question for his piece. But one thing I've definitely heard a lot about, especially for musicians, is, you know, musicians make sense on a stream, right? Maybe sometimes even parts of sense on Spotify streams or Apple Music streams, etc. And I think it's kind of similar, right? If you make a digital art piece and put it on your Twitter account and someone else kind of steals it and uses it, there's really no way to monetize that, just like it's very hard to monetize music in a sense. What NFTs kind of allow is a way to create, you know, one or a smaller amount, a scarce amount of your digital asset, and let kind of at least one person, if not multiple people, buy that and support you, right? There's an article out there called, you know, all you need is kind of one true fan to kind of kickstart your career in Web3, right? If you're a musician and you're used to making, you know, dollars every month off of a few Spotify streams, if you release an NFT for, let's say, $1,000, and you have one really super fan that loves your work and wants to support you, they can own that digital song. No one else can. It's kind of their clout and their, you know, exciting thing to own in their wallet to show off in the metaverse or just kind of have and enjoy. And you just made, you know, your previously work that was kind of just available for everyone and not really making you any money, it gave you a chance to kind of engage your community and also kind of make actual, substantial, hopefully, amount of money to start. And you do that a few times, you can kind of hopefully build somewhat of a career for yourself. And I know a lot of musicians are kind of jumping into that because they're so fed up with Spotify and Apple Music these days. But that doesn't discuss copyright. And so, David, curious if you have any thoughts on PFPs and copyright.
So I've just been seeing a lot of really interesting things in the space. I would say like Bored Apes, I think Beth was mentioning them earlier. They're one of the ones kind of leading the charge on a PFP project, letting you keep your copyright as opposed to a CryptoPunk where you don't, those are essentially the two projects where you'd see like, I think they're both, the minimum purchase on one thing is about $300,000. So, one of these more successful projects. But the Bored Apes, they've established where since you own the likeness and the copyright, people are going as far as creating almost like rock bands that look like similar to the Gorillas, where it's a bunch of different like animated figures that are the likeness of the ape. Or there's an entire project, it's spacing on me, but I'll make sure to include in the resource doc. It's like something Jenkins, but there's essentially a writing group that is asking owners of Bored Apes to sign away to share their copyright in the writing of a TV show, that the money generated from that TV show would be kicked back to the actors, which are your acting NFT, that the likeness of that. And so the rabbit hole is super deep, but there's copyright law to it. And it's not at least on my gutter pigeon, which I showed, I could essentially print that on posters and sell those posters if I wanted to. I could use that as if I wanted to be a DJ and I created that gutter pigeon as my face. And now that DJ, I'm the DJ gutter pigeon, I could do that. Like those are things that, I don't know what the limitation is in terms of display, but I just know when it comes to copyright, you can't sell digital work that that you don't own the copyright to.
Thank you. That was helpful. Yeah, I guess I think I was just wondering, it wasn't the gutter pigeon, but one of the other ones that you had, which was, I guess, I don't know if it was a screenshot or you were showing the shoes, the space.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I don't know if you own those or are those, I mean, theoretically, even if you don't own those, are you allowed to then take a screenshot or do a right click, save, and then use it in a presentation, even though you're not making money off it? Does minting your work limit how visible it is essentially once it's purchased?
So that great question, and it goes into that ownership versus consumption. So the digital work, just like if you published it on Instagram and it got reshared or cropped and reshared that way, the spreadability of it doesn't really affect the asset. If anything, it kind of increases that value or its awareness, but there's an actual owner to it. So I think you were talking about the little skull Mori. So that is a saved, right click and save of a NFT I actually own, and anybody else could do the same thing. Anyone else can go to OpenSea and do the same thing with that same exact picture I own. And then the other images there I don't own. So those are images I was able to right click and save and use. But I don't, if you check the blockchain, you check the ledger, I actually do not own those Nike shoes, or I don't own that piece of generative art, but I do own the crypto Mori. So.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, and another thing, Sivan, that maybe you were asking about, the number of people that can actually see what's in your collection is a lot greater if you have an NFT, because now there are these virtual spaces that are being created to exhibit NFTs. So for example, if you have a bunch of NFTs, you want other people to see them, you want to share them, you can put them into a virtual space and people can view them. They can view the token ID number. They can see who the original creator was. So whereas traditionally, if a collector buys art, unless they have a public collection, the work is not really shared outside of their home. I don't know if that relates to what you were saying.
Yeah.
But yeah,
yeah,
and,
it's democratizing. It's like democratizing private collections. I mean, it's not specifically, it's, I guess, the future of what NFTs are empowering.
Yeah. So maybe we have time for one more question. M is asking, If you mint an NFT, do you have to sell it? Like, is it similar to stock where it can accumulate value, or more like an eBay item with bidding and or buy it now price?
I would say, so if you mint an NFT, you don't have to sell it. You can gift NFTs. You can mint NFTs just to hold them yourself, just to like just put them up on the blockchain. And the value, like kind of to answer your question, the value attached to it essentially comes to like if you mint your own personal NFT and you yourself are an artist that's kind of getting its own community around your work, people can bid on items in your wallet, whether they're on sale or not. And so that there are ways to kind of decide intrinsic value that way, but you can 100% create NFTs just for yourself or for whatever purpose.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both essentially, you know, like for the stuff you list, you'll set a price, or it can be, you know, bid on. And then I have, you know, NFTs that I've purchased, and then, you know, just a week later, people have started bidding on them, and then they're like, you know, much more than what I originally bought it for. So I think it is a little bit like the stock market in that in that regard too. Yeah.
Do I have to set a price? So essentially, yeah, you as the creator, you're for a platform like OpenSea, you'll be the one setting the price. But then there are other platforms where they're like Foundation, where there's Dutch auctions and a bunch of different auction kind of platforms. So if setting your price isn't something you're looking for, there are auction houses, there are galleries that kind of help adjust with that as well. And even here at New Collectors, I've helped a lot of artists with figuring out, just understanding what the community looks like to help figuring out a price that values their work and time, because that's only a question you as the creator can really answer, you know.
David, do you quickly want to explain what a POAP is?
Yes, so now that we're at the end here, really thanks everybody for the questions and joining. Before Sibylla closes it out, I just wanted to mention everybody who signed up today will be receiving a POAP, which is it's a free NFT. A POAP stands for Proof of Attendance Protocol. So as we talk about the blockchain and we talk about how it's immutable and forever, you guys were all on this call. You guys were all here in this moment in time. And to congratulate you for that, we created this digital asset for you guys to have in your wallets forever. And so we hope that, you know, this NFT at the moment doesn't have any, I guess, like resale value on any of these marketplaces. But the idea of this NFT is, one, art for art's sake, but in the future, this being something that, you know, maybe will allow you to interact with the New Collectors gallery as we, you know, embrace the Web3 space even more. So thank you so much for listening and being a part of, you know, the future we're trying to build, you know, sustainably, and enjoy your POAP for real.
So we will be, thank you, David. We will be sending out a follow-up email with links to our upcoming workshops. If you're interested, sign up sooner rather than later, because they will be limited to 10 people. And if you're interested in a one-on-one workshop, if you have a lot of questions and you really feel like you need that focused attention to understand this, reach out to us. You can Instagram, email, whatever, just get in touch. And then if you're an NFT artist, please make sure that you submit your work to the NFT Open Call channel on our Discord page, which will also be linked to in the follow-up email. So thank you all so much. And
Everybody.
we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, see you in the next one.
Bye.
Thanks so much, guys.
You're awesome, Sibylla.
Bye,
Thank
bye,
you.
bye. You guys are awesome too.
Thank you, Sibylla, Henry, and everyone. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for coming, Whitney.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Zoe.
Bye.